welcome back. If you haven't been to this in a few weeks, we recently had our SaaStr APAC event, which we'll actually be chatting a little bit about today. So without further ado, let me share my screen here. Cool, and we will get underway. So we recently had our SaaStr APAC event. I think it was just last week.
We're jet lagged, but yes, it was.
We're jet lagged.
Come on. It's exactly a week, but it was a good one.
Yeah, exactly a week ago. Yeah, it was a good one. Lots of good learnings. I think sometimes when we do like these like 1,000-person events, we get some learnings that we then take, to like the bigger events, just because when I think you're in a smaller space, you kind of notice more things. So yeah, we're going to share some of our learnings from the event we just had in person. Lots of learnings. We try to boil it down to five interesting learnings that we thought would be the most helpful for anyone watching. So yeah, so we just had APAC. We have 3 other like core events upcoming. The next biggest one, which is in about 100 days, which is crazy to say, is SaaStr Europa. This is actually the 4th SaaStr Europa, but the first time we're doing it in London. So that'll be exciting. There's been like a really good surge of attendance so far for London. So I think that's been pretty well received. So yeah, that's coming up right in June. And then the big SaaStr annual back this September, 6 through 8 in the SF Bay area. If you've gone the last 2 years, we're in the same venue at the San Mateo County Event Center. For those who are out of towners, this is like 20 minutes or so from either the SFO airport or San Jose. Really accessible to get, back and forth from SaaStr to the city, or even down to San Jose and all there for any customer visits. So that's the annual. And then we'll have a SaaStr Scale, which we usually do as a digital event these days, to end the year, which is like our big kind of end of year digital event. We have a lot of things in between this, like Workshop Wednesday, smaller digital events. But these are the kind of what we call like our core events for the year. So we are one down so far, and I don't know, I think we've already done like 10 Workshop Wednesdays or so.
The only thing I'll add, if you go to the last page, I've had a lot of people reach out, and I see lots of great sponsors that we're grateful for that are sponsoring Europa and Annual or both. We will likely have more exciting updates for you. Probably early spring is when we will start communicating that, getting our ducks in a row over the next couple of weeks. And for Annual, we usually share that same thing. Like once Europa is done, we divert our attention to Annual. But the good thing for everybody across the board, we're well ahead of last year in terms of attendance, sponsors, and frankly, the planning process as well, like from a production perspective. So be confident. We'll have some good, exciting updates for you in a couple of weeks, but just want to share that for our existing sponsors.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great call out. We've got lots of learnings we'll share today, which I hopefully will be helpful for both current and prospective sponsors. Just for the upcoming events, Europa has gotten pretty big. Like I think we were originally thinking 3,000. I was like, we're already over 1,000. So we're gonna blow that number out of the water. We'll see how much we blow it out of the water. But we'll be past 3,000s at Europa this year. And then Annual, listen, in spite of everything else going on, I think we've touted it a lot in the last couple of weeks, and nothing has changed with the APAC event. I actually think there's more momentum post APAC of folks who went to APAC and now want to go to a bigger SaaStr event because they're like, oh, this is the first time we've had anything like this. And they're all like, what can we do this again? And we're like, well, we're doing 2 more this year. So yeah, I think momentum in terms of attendance has been just really strong there. So yeah, that'll be, the biggest annual yet, the biggest Europa yet in the heart of London. And then we'll do scale. So exciting times there. We wanted to quickly touch on our media because this is something that is near and dear to us. And I think we've gotten the feedback lately that we have a lot of media assets at SaaStr between like SaaStr.com, these webinars, Workshop Wednesday, all the newsletters we do, all the content we do, all the speakers, events. Many of you are subscribed to it or should be. And yeah, there's a lot in our media, and we've had, a lot of folks ask us lately how they can get in front of the or, either global SaaStr audience or build momentum either right before the event or right after the event. And a good way to do that is with our media that we do, because it is ongoing, it's evergreen. It's a great way to kind of like help build brand awareness and like solidify your messaging on more of like a multi-touch, multi-channel kind of approach. So, and also there's a picture of Poya on the slide. I like our media. I'll briefly touch on the podcast because I think this is something where like we've actually we're trying a few different things now on our podcast, which are working really well in terms of like downloads. Over the last couple of years, downloads have kind of soared. I don't think that's a surprise in terms of like the quality of content that comes out. I think one thing we always tell folks is like, if you're doing, either the annual or Europa and you have something more evergreen, or you have something new that you want to launch and get the word out, the podcast is a really great way to do it. It's super turnkey, so it's really low effort from the sponsor. You literally just have to make a script, and we do everything. Like we record it, we edit it, like everything is all set. So it's really easy. You just got to write a script in like 10 minutes or less, 15 seconds. It's pretty short, just figure out what you want your CTA to be, listen to maybe a few samples that we send you and send it over. And I think it's great if you're doing one of these events to keep the podcast in mind, because we have really great we always have really great content like leading up to the events on the podcast and immediately after on the podcast. And listen, I'll be honest, our podcast always, has a good boost post event. So if you're thinking about, coupling the event and you wanted to just, solidify your messaging that was at the event and also reach everyone who's in SaaStr but not at the event, many more people are able to listen to the podcast than come to an in-person event. The podcast is a great way to do that. We've tried a few different things now too. Like we do a mix of, original SaaStr content from Jason. We do original CRO Confidential that Sam Blond now hosts on our podcast. And we do some of the very best sessions from our event. So, some of the APAC content is about to go up on the podcast. And we're also starting to record to release later in the year some SaaStr Enterprise episodes of the podcast that are more enterprise focused. So if any of that sounds like things you want to do, the podcast is your thing, is your jam. Anything to add there on the podcast, Poya?
No, I'll just echo two things to just simplify it. If like, for example, last year I see Kim on this call, ProfitWell, Paddle merged. It's great if you want people to like associate it with like an update you have, like whether it's a product update, a company update, maybe they've merged, maybe they've acquired a company. If you want to change, let's just say, the perception of how people remember your brand and your company, I think it's great for those, right? For example, Brex recently is doing a huge push around wanting to be associated as like a span management and showing the various value props they have. Like it's great for that because it's a megaphone that hits everybody. The second thing that Amelia basically said, the nice part about offering various, let's say, ways of like Revenue Confidential podcast, the Founder Confidential, we can be a little more tailored, meaning if you only target founders, guess what? We can only have you on the episodes that we target for founders. If you only target revenue leaders, we can have you on episodes where it's geared towards revenue leaders. So there's a little more, let's call it focus now as well. So it's a double.
Totally agree. Yeah. And once the enterprise ones comes out, same thing. We're recording those now so that we can release them in like a huge batch and keep that going. But same thing there, kind of same idea with Revenue Confidential. It'll be an enterprise focused version. So if that's your jam, you let us know, because it has it's a megaphone. Boy, hit it. It's a megaphone. And then slightly confusing, I think, for folks. We do have 3 different newsletters. So I'll break it down real quickly. These are samples of each. But we have 3 newsletters, 2 of which are more traditional newsletters, one of which is like a LinkedIn newsletter. So if you're big on LinkedIn, the Insider is definitely the one to do there. But on the weekly and the daily, so really the difference on this is frequency and slightly audience. So I think if you have something that is more high level, top of funnel. Like these two are really great examples because they're both ebooks that, you know, Manuel and Blue Snap wanted to put out, and they were like new ebooks. This is really great for the weekly because this is seen once a week, right? You're like, I've got new top of funnel content. I really need some extra lead gen this month. Maybe we're low on leads. The weekly is a great way to do it. You know, it goes out to almost 100,000 people now with the way that our newsletter has surged recently. So it goes in front of a lot of folks, and people do click these ads. So I mean, boy, I could share a little more there, but like, yeah, I think this one's really great if you need a little top of funnel boost. The weekly is my favorite to do that. It goes out every Sunday morning. And this is like our most read edition of any out of our 3 newsletters. This one is the most read, and it's also the most I would say long tail newsletter, in that like people will read this thing, you know, when it comes out, that whole entire week, following it the next week, later that month. Like people come back to this because the SaaStr Weekly is literally our top content of the week. So you know, it's easy to miss the daily. Sometimes the daily gets a little long because we put literally every new article in it, but the weekly is literally the best of SaaStr every week. And that's why people open it. So it's a good one.
Yeah. Only 2 things I'll add is the weekly's been going since 2015. So there's like that loyalty. People like consistently read it. And the open rates as a result are freaking through the roof. And the nice part is the unsubscribe is also very low. So you kind of get something that is almost guaranteed to, you know, get you the results that you want.
Yeah. Love the weekly. It's been near and dear to my heart. Okay, the daily. In spite of what the name suggests, it's not quite every day. It used to be, but that was too much of frequency. So now it's Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So yeah, 3 times a week, and then the weekly goes out on Sunday. So we send 4 like core newsletters a week because there's some people who are subscribed to both. So we're mindful of that one in our sends. And we've actually seen people do both a weekly and a daily sponsorship. But yeah, the daily is a little different. So you'll notice the ads are a little bit bigger. It looks more like an embedded article, and that's because of how we do the daily, right? I'm like, it's literally a digest of all of our new content. And so we format this to look more like an article. So if you're like, oh, I really like that. You can see, like, for instance, you know, Blue Snap did both. Their creative is like here on both the weekly and the daily. You can couple them. That's what they did. They really liked it because then they got both boosts. They did the same CTA, just different creative. And they really liked that. That really worked for them. And what they were trying to do with their, like, you know, this was at the end of the year, and it was like ahead of 2023 payments report. I loved it. And then Paragon, you know, is more of a more bottom of funnel, like, hey, is this, you know, is our platform potentially something that could help make your life easier? And I think that's sort of an ad we see a lot now too, is like, how can your product or service help make, you know, the lives of our community members a little bit easier? And it's a good way to do it in the daily because it's more frequency, right? So even though there's slightly less people reading it than the weekly, they're going to see it more often. And it's more, I would say it's slightly more revenue focused on the daily in terms of audience than the weekly. You know, the weekly, as Poya said, has been around for 5 years. There's a lot of CEOs, a lot of long-term speakers. You'd be surprised. Sometimes I'm like, who opened this? You'd be surprised who reads it, but yeah, slightly more revenue focused. So I like the daily for that reasons, if you're thinking about that, if that's helpful for folks. And then we have the insider, which is on LinkedIn. So again, if LinkedIn is your thing, it's pretty straightforward. It's a LinkedIn newsletter. It goes out both on LinkedIn and an email. It's got a super big ad. So if you're into super big, like, billboard style creatives, just think of the insider as a LinkedIn billboard that's presented by SaaStr. That's the best way to think about that one too. Cool. So without further ado, let's crack into our 5 interesting learnings from the very first SaaStr APAC. This is a good one. I think Boy can speak a lot to this one because Lark is his account, but we put these great photos of their team and their booth for a few reasons on, you know, learning number 1, which maybe isn't a huge earth-shattering learning, but I think always a good reminder, even to Team SaaStr, right? It's never too early to prep your on-site plan. I think Lark literally has a custom vending machine, you can see here, that they made for this event. I'm like, that takes time. Like they had, I mean, it's not even the fact that they had a custom vending machine, which is like already, you know, time consuming and takes some creative cycles and, you know, budget, and I'm sure approvals and like copy and design, like takes a lot of parties to just make one little like vending machine, but also everything they put in the vending machine was Lark branded. I was so impressed. I was like, wow, not only do they have custom vending, I was like, what are they rolling into? I was like, I've never seen this being rolled into a SaaStr sponsor hall, like custom vending machine and all custom swag. Like their team literally came the day before. They were like rolling out all their little custom swag. They put it in the vending machine one by one. Like it was so cute. I was so impressed, just because like the amount of effort that went into that pre-show was like not lost upon us. And then it definitely was not lost upon the attendees. Like you can see in that bottom photo, like the vending machine was like full. By the end of the event, it was empty. Like everyone had come up to their booth. Everyone was wanting to, you know, do the game and get scanned and get a prize from the vending machine. Like literally everyone did it. I think they ran out of like the golden tickets they were giving to have people come up and do the vending machine. And we had so many people coming up to just, I don't know if they know this, we had so many people coming up to just our team and being like, do you guys have any more golden tickets that I can go take to Lark? I was like, oh, everyone's talking about Lark. Like it was so cool. And that requires a lot of prep, right? Like if so many teams coming together between like marketing and sales of like, okay, we're going to do the vending machine. What do we do with these folks? How are we going to capture them? You know, what are we going to say to them when they do come up? That requires a lot of planning and effort, but it definitely paid off for Lark in such a big way at APAC, that I can't, that's why we made it point number one.
Yeah. I'll add a couple of things on this just so you guys know. What we mean by plan sometimes is like start with the end in mind, right? Like what are we optimizing for? Is it leads? Is it brand? Is it a combination of things, which is the case for people? And then from there, we can make some suggestions, right, of what we've seen from other events. And then what we loved about the Lark team is they went back as a team, they collaborated and they came up with these creative plays. And the other thing that was very impressive, each person that attended kind of knew their roles and responsibilities and like what their part of making this event was successful was. And it was a really nice team effort, right? They had different hours they worked, they rotated people. So there's a lot of other sponsors that I even see some of them on this webinar that do as good of a job. So this may not be a surprise, but it's never too early, because the other side of it was we had some sponsors, and we always do at every event, whether it's SaaStr or non-SaaStr event, that you can just see they're kind of shooting from the hip, right? Like they don't have that concrete plan on top of all their responsibilities. This kind of came up on them. So it's never, ever, ever too early to get people in a room, ask them, hey, if we're walking away from this event, what are we optimizing for? And let's come up with one or two creative plays to optimize for them. So point number one.
And I love that. I love everything you said on the context. I think too, you know, Lark really went all in on this, right? To Poya's point, it's never too early to plan of like what your end game is. And like, they all rallied around, like, we're going to do this activation. We're going to do the vending machine. It's going to help sales and marketing. It's going to help see it. Like, we're going to commit to this. And like everything we do around our booth, you know, the t-shirts that they're wearing, everything they did was like centered around this activation. So, and it was literally, oh, you're wearing your Lark shirt. It was literally noticed by everyone, including us. So major kudos. Like it was definitely noticed by all the attendees as well. And it was super, you know, they have like emojis everywhere because it's, I don't know if you guys know, Lark is like powered by ByteDance. So like, you know, it was just super cute. Like it showed off their branding. You know, not a lot of people know ByteDance for TikTok. Not a lot of people know ByteDance for Lark. So I think it was good for, again, it hit a lot of what they did in their activation, hit a lot of goals, right? So I think taking the time to pre-plan of like, okay, to Poya's point, what are our goals? And then coming up with ways to hit that, like whether it's doubling down on one thing, like an activation, or, you know, doing a couple different things so that you can make sure you have those points hit at the booth. There's different ways to go about it. You know, it's not a one size fits all for event sponsorships and what will work for your brand versus somebody like a Lark. It really depends, right? So I never think it's too early to prep your on-site plan. And also like the earlier the plan, the more we can help, right? Like we were in talks with Lark. I know Poyo was in talks with them for many, many cycles, like a lot of phone calls of like helping them get to this point. So like also that to say like our team can be very helpful on that side. Like if you have an idea that you want to bring to life and you're like, hey, we're thinking about doing XYZ, like Lark was literally like, we're thinking about doing this vending machine and golden ticket activation. How can we do it? And we're like, well, if you sponsor the registration, then you can do the golden tickets at registration. We'll help you get, all the power, all the labor you need to install the vending machine. We'll make sure you have the extra space, like everything, like a lot of parties came together, not just Lark, but also our side in terms of production to make this happen. So if you have an idea like this, or this jumpstarts you to think about an idea like this, it's never too early for it. And I would say the earlier the better, especially something like this, like, this required like extra power and extra labor. And like the more time our team has to that, the more likely it is we can do it versus like, if it's super last minute, we might have to say no because the venue says no. So I think it's never too early to start pre-planning. Last thing I'll say on this slide too, the top photo I included because Lark actually used this event as an on-site, which we're seeing more and more of. And I think that's something to also bake into your early planning. Like we're seeing actually a lot of people do this now. A lot of folks started doing it at, I would say annual last year, more so than Europa. We had like maybe one or two people do it at Europa, and then a lot more people do it at annual. Had a bunch of people do it at APAC, Lark, Sequoia, lots of folks. Like they just brought, Sequoia brought literally everyone from Sequoia, APAC, and all their portfolio companies, which was cool. But yeah, we're seeing a lot more people in their on-site plans include like a team offsite at SaaStr. So if that is something, again, you're wanting to do to Poya's point, like Lark had, they didn't have this many people in the booth at once, let's be clear. But they brought their whole team, right? So that they could, rotate people in and out on booth duty, have, kind of experts there. If someone had a question, they had people go to sessions, they had people do brain dates, like they literally did they had people go to the, opening happy hour, like they did the full thing. So I think if that's something you're considering, or if you're like, I don't know, we need to do an offsite later this year, but where do we do it? SaaStr is a great place to do it. You can do a lot there. Also, if you do it at like Europe or annual, we have a lot of baked in like happy hours, which are good like team building activities as well. So it's never too early to prep. We touched on this a little bit, but I would say, really important to, it's not a one size fits all, right? So I think choosing an on-site engagement strategy that works for you, like, again, defining your goals super early. We put 2 images here as reminders of like Cloudkeeper. You can see they did like a spin to win in their booth. GP did like an ice cream machine in their booth, like different, but they collected leads in different ways. Like Lark was really big on scanning. GP and some others were really good on like, they're really big on business cards. Like they wanted people's business cards because business cards have phone numbers. You might be somebody who wants both. Like you want to scan people and you want their business card. Like Poya just did a really great session a couple of weeks ago with Guide CX, where, Todd was saying he does both. He has his team scan and he will take their business card and write his name on it and give it back to them, right? And take a picture of it. Like he does different things so that for his team that works, right? Like again, figuring out whatever will work for you, or being, adaptable. Like if you get on site and it's not going as planned, being able to, because it's live events, like being able to adapt to what works, to get in front of the audience that you want to get in front of, particularly at, a SaaStr event, I think is super important. Because again, it's not one size fits all. And there's a lot of people, especially, Europe and annual have a lot more people than APAC. Big thing to keep in mind is like, okay, are you just targeting, the CEOs that are coming? That's fine. Like do something that says, hey, CEOs or hey, founders, like speak to just them and they will appreciate that. Or if you just, if you just sell to finance, or if you just sell to marketing, or if you're a sales enablement platform and you just want salespeople at the booth, like if you speak to that, it will draw people, right? And like you do specific activations that are tailored just to that micro segment within SaaStr. I do think that works well as well. And we saw that a bit with APAC, with Ahrefs, who is like, they're more marketing focused. And so like all their copy that they had on their booth was all marketing focused, right? It was like you could tell that they want to talk to marketers. And as, you know, a marketer myself, I was like, oh, that's cool. I was like, that's cool because like, I can tell like they're trying to talk to people like me, and I'm enticed to, you know, go walk over there and see what they're all about, because we all need extra help these days, right? So it's like, I think taking a strategy, you know, thinking about the booth in terms of like activations, copy, what goes on your booth loop, what are you going to print, what are you going to bring, that has to be tailored to you and your goals, right? It's definitely never going to be a one size fits all.
The only thing I'll add here is food activations, people love them. So if you're thinking about doing that, please let us know a couple of weeks ahead of time. Some folks love to get on site thinking we can come up with a food activation. It's very difficult because you have to get permits, you have to go through the venue. So please, if you're thinking about doing a food activation, let us know ahead of time. And this way, maybe you're not competing with someone as well. So only other thing I'll add in there.
Yeah, that's a good call out too. Like, we do try and make the activations like one of each type per thing, right? Like if you're gonna do, like if GP did this you know, kind of SaaStr machine at the event, we're like, well, we're not gonna have two people do that. Like so yeah, I think it's also good because, you know, our team has the contacts and can talk you through like, okay, what are other people doing, so that it's not competitive to what you're trying to do on site as well. So that's a good point. Okay, maximizing your on-site experience. I think this part is maybe a little bit more surprising to me at least, but there's a lot, but also like I get it because the live events are overwhelming. There's a lot going on at SaaStr. Any given event, you know, like I said, there's the sponsors, there's the content, there's this thing we do called brain dates. We do meet a VC programs. We do like lounges at SaaStr annual. We do the big party at SaaStr annual. Like, we do a lot of SaaStr. There's like 8 stages at annual, and there's probably going to be like 4 or 5 at Europa. Like, there's a lot going on. There's like a cantina, there's a pub at Europa. Like, there's a lot going on. And again, I think defining your goals early, figuring out your plan will help you maximize your on-site experience, because then you can, you know, send the right folks to kind of divide and conquer the show. Like, not to take away from anything you guys do at the booth, but I think there are different ways now, especially these days, to make the most out of something like a SaaStr, right? We've seen a lot more people do offsites. We've seen a lot of people recently also ask us for like literally ancillary opportunities. So to Poya's point, something like, you know, the food activations doesn't have to be food. It could be a different kind of activation. We've seen people do headshots before, you know, in their booths when they wanted to do that. We've seen, you know, this gal, we'll talk about branding in a second, but she also has like, you know, a branded Vanta lanyard. Like, we've seen people who want to do the lanyards, or they want to do, you know, some sort of registration drop. Literally different activations again, in the on-site experience. So I think maximizing it and then defining who you want to bring to the show as much as you can to kind of divide and conquer the experiences will help you maximize the event, right? I think more and more we're helping folks kind of see, you know, the value of bringing not only AEs, I think, for the booth, but also bringing CSMs in terms of like, there's probably going to be a lot of existing customers there already, right? Like, regardless of where the budget comes from, I think at the end of the day, if you can meet with, you know, a handful of customers, like 5 or 6 over the course of 2 or 3 days, that's kind of a win for your CS team, right? So we're seeing more folks send CS, we're seeing folks send more like, you know, buyers or revenue leaders or whatever it might be. And they all have different goals, right? Like, if you have your CSMs comes, they may never go to the booth. Like, you might not want to put them on booth duty, because you might want them to be like roaming the halls, seeing who's attending, who's from customers, you know, reaching out, pre-setting meetings. We're seeing that a lot more now. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. You also might want to bring some, like, you know, marketers, if they want to do brain dates. It's a good way to get in front of folks without being too pitchy. Brain dates are, if you don't know them, they're like these one-on-one and small group meetings we do. We do some screening of them, but literally anyone can do them, including sponsors. And it's been great for folks. I know some people who they send literally a marketing or a head of marketing, and they do a bunch of brain dates. Like ARES just did this at APAC, like their CMO did a bunch of brain dates, and people loved it. Like, they were like, I'm like, this guy's already prolific on Twitter, and like, he's there, you know, answering marketing questions. And again, it's a great way just to get in front of people, and he's just there sharing marketing knowledge. And naturally you're going to be like, okay, well, what do you do? That's helpful. So I think maximizing that is a good way. I also know people who send, you know, whether it's sales, marketing, revenue, whomever, CS, send folks just to attend, maybe if they're newer to the team, because it's a good way for them, you know, to get in front of folks and also to meet each other in person. Like your team hasn't met up in a while. I know folks who specifically at annual either just do brain dates, or they do a mix of like just brain dates and like hanging out in the cantina to do meetings with like other founders. Like it is not unheard of for some folks really only go to content. Some folks only do the networking. But yeah, we kind of have these tracks of attendees, and I think as sponsors, it's something that I can't stress enough to think more about, because you're already going, so you might as well, you know, maximize your presence for the day and get the most out of it, because there's a lot you can do within even different departments. And for anyone who is maybe still recruiting or will be recruiting by the time it's June or September, I know a lot of folks who come to SaaStr and recruit. And we've had a lot of sponsors tell us in the past they found, you know, XYZ new hire at the show.
I'll just add one thing, and I see a couple of questions that we'll answer. Don't forget about the content. What I mean by that is I actually met an attendee and a sponsor that specifically like had a set of speakers they wanted to watch. One, because the content was valuable. So like it's always great for your team members that are coming to up level their skill sets, learn from other people's experiences. But the second reason, for some of them, it's a buyer that they want to maybe connect with. So frankly, it just gives them a really good reason after their session to go up and say hi, or just use some of the things that they've learned in that speaking session to connect with them on site or after the event. So like there was literally one person I met that was so intentional of like the people they wanted to go, and there was different motivations or reasons of why they wanted to attend those sessions. But like, don't forget that's another lever. And I think you can only do that if you've kind of ahead of time had some plans and given people the opportunity to kind of pick and choose what they want to attend. So don't forget that portion of it as well. And I see a question, which is Alonzo, and it's specifically around food and beverage activations. So it's a tough one to answer, but I'll give you the guidelines. Some of it is restricted by the venue. So for example, in APAC, we had to go through the venue, like you couldn't bring any outside vendor for the most part. Whereas for annual, for example, the biggest restriction around using the venue is around alcohol. Like they won't let you outsource that to anybody else. But on other things, they're very flexible with permission. You do need a health permit. Yeah, exactly. You do need a health permit. Some of it is a little more SaaStr related, just using our 10 years of experience. So what I mean by that is sponsors that had it last year, for the most part, within reason, we try giving them the first right of refusal. So for example, Trip Actions last year did the Vietnamese coffee. They're doing it again in 2023. They've already locked it in, but it's because they have that first right of refusal. And then the second way is we try giving priority, because contractually we have to our top sponsors, and we kind of work our way down. So we've actually kicked off that process with some of our diamond sponsors, and we're working below it. So I'll give you an example. Someone's thinking about doing the juice. Once they lock in that juice, during those hours, we don't want to competing, just because we want you guys to maximize, right, the experience, and we don't want two competing of the same activations. So those are at least some of the guidelines. The sooner you let us know, the better. But again, just know that the sponsors ahead of you, or on like the higher tiers, have priority, or if they've had it last year, they have priority.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I would say, you know, something like the Lark machine is a good, the vending machine is a great example, because I'm like, that's theirs. It's custom branded, right? Like they made it for SaaStr APAC, but now they have it, like they can take it to other events. They can, I'm pretty sure they'll throw it in their office and like put other things in it, you know, like we've seen that a lot from folks too. It's like, if you don't want to worry about it being exclusive, you know, to your brand, but having it be an on-site activation, we've seen a lot of brands do something where it's like, okay, we're going to make something either for SaaStr. If you're doing other events, you can make it, you know, before SaaStr and bring it to SaaStr with our help. It's to do something that's custom to them, so that, you know, you don't have to worry about that exclusivity as much, because you'll know that like you own this thing, and that's the only thing that you own, right? Like we've seen people bring their mascots before. That's a good way to maximize, the experience of like that mascot, if you have one or not, like we used to not have one, but now we have one Hexie. Like we're like, I don't know about this mascot thing. And now Hexie's been around for years. Like, yeah, so it's a fun thing that you can, kind of play off of. I'll tell you in earnest, getting a mascot fabricated is really inexpensive and really a lot of fun. We've had many iterations of Hexie now in both IRL, DJ Hexie stickers, like we've had a lot of fun with it. And folks like to post pictures with Hexie. So yeah, again, it doesn't have to necessarily be food, right? It's a good way to do it because especially at annual or even at London where we're doing it, like it's a good way to refresh people, create an environment where they want to come naturally speak to you. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily always need to be food or swag. So I think that's something to keep in mind too. Like it doesn't have to be those two things. Like we've seen people do other things that are activations, literally just either custom branded activations or some sort of activation. Like we had people do VR experiences at annual. We had people do like different little games. Some people that at APAC brought like their own custom branded games. Like it's, again, if it's custom to your brand, you won't have to worry about it being exclusive. And also like, it will help you stand out, right? Because to Poya's point on food, like we do it exclusive for the hours in which you book it, but like, doesn't mean that someone tomorrow won't be doing that too. So yes, it does give you a boost to your booth, but the things that work, I would say almost 100% of the time are the things that are custom just to your brand, right? Like how does it tie to your brand? How is it something custom? And then, if you're thinking about this budget wise, like if you think about fabricating something that is specific to your brand that you can take to SaaStr and then, either keep in your office or bring to other events or your own customer events, like that's going to pay a lot more dividends. But again, it's not a one size fits all. So that might not be your thing. You might not want something custom. You might want something that's a little more turnkey, like the F&B or like a podcast. So different flavors for sure. Okay. This one is always a good reminder. And I know it's hard to impress upon folks sometimes, but man, these events go by quick. Like I remember being there in the morning of loading and I was like, how is it already like 1 o'clock? I was like, we got here at 8 and it like flew by. And now we've got to go to Lavo. So yeah, it goes by really fast and all that to say, like, if you're like, oh, I know it's tempting to be like, oh, just do this when we get there. You're not going to have that time. Like, this is why I cannot stress pre-planning enough. Like, it goes by quicker than you think. Cause then you get there and you're like, oh, I want to take photos. Oh, I want to set up I want to make the booth all cute. Or, oh, I want to go run to Target and get some succulents to put on the booth because it matches what we're doing. Like people have done that. It goes by fast. And I think, in order to be responsive to things that might happen, which we'll talk about next, like, I think it's good to just have your stuff kind of like done and then show up and, obviously, prep your booth, do the whole thing, but just know that it'll go by fast, right? Like if you're like, oh, okay, like I'll just think of a way to round robin these leads once we get there and we know how scanning is going. No, like figure that out first. Like figure out how you're going to collect leads, what you're going to do with them, and also how you're going to measure them before you get to the show. It's a lot better when you can do it calmly beforehand, especially if you need to, go into any platforms and set stuff up, which you're probably going to have to do that before you get there. I've seen folks show up and they're like, oh man, I didn't think about the booth loop. I've got to like frantically call my designer, right, to see if they'll get me something in a day. It's just always notoriously hard. Like it goes by so fast. And I think just to, just save yourself the time to tackle anything that may happen on site or last minute or any questions that happen or, stuff. Again, it's live events, stuff happens. Sometimes things happen either outside of our control or your control that you're going to want to be agile to. And I think if you haven't done the pre-planning and you save too much of it for on-site, it can really deter from the experience of like talking to the attendees, right? It's like those attendees are not going to come back a day later once the event's over. Like they're there for the days. I think to maximize like just your mindset and how you talk to the attendees, because it does go by quickly and it goes by quickly for them too, right? Like they're talking to a lot of people at once in the course of 3 days too. So I think if you keep all that in mind, it will help kind of maximize how you're chatting with folks, how you have that ROI, right? Like if okay, I'm going to scan this person it's going to go to a spreadsheet. And then like, I've already got like whatever, my Zap set up where I've got my sales team already on it. So like, they're going to immediately start, scoring it. They're going to look up, things to help personalize the segmentation. They're going to follow up with them in a day when the event's over. Like all of that helps streamline, your response time to anyone you meet on site. It also helps, streamline the conversations you do have on site, which in the end, I have to think will lead to higher ROI just overall on the show. And then I went the wrong way. Last one. This is a good point that Poya brought up too, being agile, because stuff's been known to happen.
I'll give you an example. Actually, there was one sponsor that wanted to do a CERN activation. We went through the venue, connected them with an amazing vendor. The day of the show, that vendor did not show up and was unresponsive. We felt bad. The venue felt bad. Thankfully, the sponsor was very understanding, and we came up with a plan B, which was, hey, let's just go get ice cream. Let's give it out during hours that doesn't compete with another sponsor. And it was awesome. It was a great experience. We fixed it. But I know it sounds cheesy, but even for those scenarios, like, hey, if this happens, what do we do, right? We had another sponsor. They did not get their swag, right? So what do we do now? Guess what? We got to go come up with like a raffle. Maybe we do a donation. We do something, right? So those plan Bs, I always think are important in this scenario, because I hate to say it, it's bound to happen to some sponsor. So if you're prepared for it, you can be a little less emotional and handle it better. So we'll do a quick recap, and we'll take any questions we have before we say our goodbyes. But the 5 learnings, right? It's never too early to plan. Plan 2 was choose an on-site strategy that works with you or for you. 3, maximize the on-site experience. 4, it goes by fast. 5, be agile and have a plan B for different things. So with that said, thanks for joining us. Any questions, put in the Q&A. We can only see it if you do it in the Zoom. So if you're live streaming, apologies. Nice reminder to join us next time, because it's really difficult to go back and forth. We'll take a few minutes if there are questions. Otherwise, as always, thanks for joining us. A reminder for next week's webinar. I think this is a cool reminder. We're going to do it with one of our sponsors, their CEO, Massimo, has been a longtime fan, not only of SaaStr, but different community events. And we're going to talk about the non-obvious, non-tangible ways of measuring the success of events, right? When it comes to team development, recruiting, bringing the team together, things that at least B and Massimo really care about. So if you like to tune in, please, we encourage you to meet us next week on Thursday. I believe it's March 9th at 9 a.m. PT. So we'll love to see you there. Otherwise, I think it's a good opportunity to thank everybody that joined us today. And until next time, Amelia and I wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Be safe, be good, and catch you on next week's webinar.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Poya.